You're tuned into the Unnecessary Harm podcast, where we drill down on issues of substance use and its cultural impact. Your host, Shane Varco, Executive Director of the Delgado Institute, with over 40 years experience in youth and community work and a passion for building resilience.
Hey, welcome back to the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Good to have you with us again. I want to kick off with a poem. Interesting poem. 'Twas a dangerous cliff, as they freely confessed, though to walk near its crest was so pleasant, but over its terrible edge there had slipped a duke and full many a peasant. So the people said something would have to be done, but their projects did not at all tally. Some said put a fence at the edge of the cliff. Some said an ambulance down in the valley. But the cry of the ambulance carried the day. For the cliff is all right if you're careful, they said. And if folks even slipped and are dropping, it isn't the slipping that hurts them so much as the shock down below when they're stopping. So day after day as these mishaps occurred, quick forth would those rescuers sally to pick up the victims who fell off the cliff with their ambulance down in the valley. Then an old sage remarked, "It's a marvel to me that people give far more attention to repairing results than to stopping the cause, when they'd much better aim at prevention. Let us stop at its source, all this mischief," cried he. "Come neighbours and friends, let us rally. If the cliff we will fence, we might also dispense with the ambulance down in the valley." That's just part of a very, very old poem. In fact, a 130-year-old poem by Joseph Malins, which is also one of the key elements of one of our major platforms called Fence Builder. As I said, welcome to the Unnecessary Harm podcast. And today we've got some fantastic guests with us. And it's my very real pleasure to welcome today's guest from 180TC Rehabilitation and Recovery Program. This awesome health and humanity restoring project is a comprehensive full-time residential initiative designed for individuals aged 18 and over, basically adults, both women and men, of course. Its mission is to empower participants with the essential skills to lead successful lives, free from addictions and other life-controlling issues. The program combines one-on-one counselling, group work and classroom-based activities covering a wide range of topics, including life management skills, important, self-image, relationships, communication, emotional regulation, big one right there, and spiritual growth, incredibly important. I'd like to introduce our first guest, Troy Kitto. Now, Troy is the operations manager at 180TC. He's married with 5 daughters. Good luck with that, Troy. I'm sure you got a lot going with that. Had a 23-year addiction and found recovery at 180TC back in 2008. So outstanding, and has remained refreshingly sober and abstinent ever since. Along with Troy's very now redeemed lived experience and very hard-earned resiliency, he has multiple certifications and diplomas in mental health and community sectors as well. He currently oversees 24 staff and volunteers at any given time. Welcome, Troy.
Thanks, Shane.
Fantastic. Now you got yeah, beautiful. Thanks for joining us. You got 2 fantastic cohort. I'll get the words out. 2 fantastic guests with you from your cohort. So with this David and Julian, I'll get it right. Now you guys are both program graduates, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So I like to borrow a quote here from one of my favourite podcasters, Dave Flosson, and he says, "I'm not in recovery." He says, "I'm really enjoying living a sober life," and I think you guys are in that space as well, eh?
Oh, absolutely.
Fantastic. So just be interested in that poem. I didn't read the whole poem out to you, and it's on our website, and it's again a staple in our platform because it just speaks heavily to our mandate and our mission, but it speaks to a lot of the issues that are going on in culture. So this whole fence and ambulance thing. Julian? I'll go to you. What's your first impression of that poem? What you heard of it? What first thing that comes to mind to you?
It was actually the sudden stop that really struck me because going through addiction there is always going to be a sudden stop. It's like when somebody says, well, I've lost my car keys. Well, it's always the last place you look. At the end of the day, there is always a rock bottom, and there is always a place where it has to stop. So like experiencing, going through that sudden stop and then coming back up again, that right there was the beginning of the rest of my life, to be quite honest.
Okay, well, we'll just jump in there. We won't go down that road just yet. I love your thinking, but I like the fact that that's the thing that sparked you. It's like, okay, I heard that. What about you, David? What was the first response when you heard that excerpt from the poem?
Sure. What sort of stuck out to me was the prevention. It's better to prevent than actually go through that. I suppose you say what Julian said, the sudden stop. I think that that is one of the things we try and do here. But it's also one thing that I think should be taught more throughout the world is how to actually prevent it rather than go through it. A lot of what I did in my work as a personal trainer was about preventing getting sick and ill later on in life, sort of building up that ability to stop that. But yeah, the sudden stop was an interesting one too, talking about rock bottom. That for me, it's a long story, but that for me was very apparent. Happened very, very quickly, and yeah, sort of forced me to turn around. And I'd love to see people not have to go to that point to have to turn around. So that was that definitely spoke.
Cool. Keep that thought in mind too, mate. No, I like that because that's now part of your agenda. So we'll buy into that. Now, what about you, Troy? I mean, you're the boss here, so we're gonna.
Yeah. So I thought. I had a look at it through boss's eyes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, we've got clientele in this place that will get stopped by the fence. We've got clientele that will get stopped by the bottom of the cliff, and we've got clientele that learn how to jump over the fence. And I just think to myself, it's just a different sort of cohort and different ways of dealing with each individual person on their journey of recovery.
Yeah, I love it. I think I wrote a long treatise many years ago about fences. Based on this is going back 25, 30 years ago. But I wrote this thing about fences, and I used to be an ambulance driver as a community worker and kind of chaplain. I used to be an ambulance driver, and you're always great. You rock up with the ambulance, in on, and you do the triage, and you're with them, and you're showing them compassion and care, and they're lying there in a complete mess, telling you, "Oh, thank you so much, it's awesome," And then I started realizing, this is relentless. This just doesn't end. I said, I'm 24 hours ambulance. I thought, what about building fences? This is before I ever heard this poem existed. So I started building fences, and what I found was that when you start building a fence, you get in people's way. Right? The fence is not just protective, it's prohibitive. So it's not just protecting them from bad, it's stopping them from doing what they want. And so what I found was I had to build a robust fence, and I had to put razor wire on top. Yeah. They wanted to climb over the top of the sucker. And so, okay, you want to climb over me, mate? It's going to cost you because I care too much about you to let you go over the edge. But you're right. Some people will climb over, razor wire and all, and they'll jump, and they have to have the ambulance. So we'll revisit all that later on. Loving the insights, gentlemen. And it's good to have that spontaneous kind of reaction to that. It's important. So you're on the rehab journey, or this is one of the tricky questions in the recovery space. And depending on who you speak to, which demographic you engage, which protocol for recovery is involved, is you get different answers. I don't have a problem with someone who says I'm in ongoing recovery. I certainly have no problem with someone who says I am recovered. I think that's also a legitimate posture. So, gentlemen, tell me, just jump in. Are you in that journey of recovery? Are you in a space where you feel you are recovered, or what's going on there?
Anyway. I'll go. I shared this morning, so we ran the staff table this morning. I'm 17 years clean. Now, I pride myself on being 17 years clean, and a lot of the time I'll say that I'm done. I won't go back. But I also shared a story that a couple of weeks ago, we'd had a party at my place and there was leftover grog in the fridge. I found myself last weekend, after doing a hard day on the property, walking into the fridge to get water and getting tempted by what was left in the fridge, calling the wife out to witness me tipping that out to make sure it was out of my sight. That's 17 years in. So I say the recovery journey is something that needs to be worked on every day. And as soon as you let your defences down, the fence down, you're at the bottom of the cliff again pretty quick.
Yep, I hear that. I think that's really good. That's a good part of the ongoing issue of managing the potential to relapse. And I think one of the difficulties about the wellness, the new recovery spaces that are starting to emerge, and they are new, they're new genres of this. Whereas, and I deal with these cohorts as well. So let's be fair. I'm not here to criticise their position, but I see the major flaws in it. Now, recovery can be, well, I used to be a daily user, now I'm a weekly user. Recovery can be, I used to be a hourly user, now I'm a daily user. But I am in recovery. And so abstinence, or the exiting of substance use, is being erased from the equation in a lot of these sectors, which is really concerning, because we all know that, I think it was, I can't remember his first name, Julian Romano, who said you cannot heal in a place that made you sick. And I think one of the difficulties about being healed and restored to best practice health requires that no toxins are part of your life. And the idea that I've got access to toxins and I can take them and manage that is just counterintuitive to the nature of being full health. So, having said that, I'm not here, please, I want to reiterate to our listeners, we're not here to say that people are going through that process or engaging in that protocol. If it's helping you use less, wonderful.
Yep.
But ultimately, we want to see as many people as possible completely liberated from these things. But David, with you, your journey, it's the term I like to use, and this is my language, so I don't want to overlay that on you if you feel uncomfortable with that. But for me, this journey out of a toxic space, I'm going to use that term, into a non-toxic space, into a good space, a healthy space, is a journey of being remade. For me, it's because you have to kind of go back to some of the real issues that are there. And before we go, for all you gentlemen, before we go back into what was the absolute cause or the trigger for you to launch into, well, maybe not substance use, but that leveraged substance use into a place where it became life controlling, an addiction, for want of a better word. What were the factors in your journey of being remade that were really key to you? Some of the real key moments, not of, it could be an awakening, but what are the key moments of remaking where you went, oh wow, I wish I'd had that before, or oh wow, that's so important? David.
Wow, there's so many different ones. So where I kind of knew I had to turn myself around was ended up being incarcerated. And the first night I prayed for forgiveness to God. I said to him, can you please show me a better way to live and a better way to go about things? I was very...
Also, God showed up for the first time in your life, did he, right there? You didn't know God before, and all of a sudden you went like desperate people. Oh, there must be a God, let's pray to him. Was that your journey?
I knew him before. I grew up in a family, in a Christian home and a Christian background, but I never engaged. I always saw what he was kind of doing, but I always thought I was a little bit too smart for the whole thing, or cool. Like, no, I don't know how to put it, to be honest. But when I was inside and he did, and things have progressively got a little bit easier. They didn't get better, to say, but he put me into a place where I was forced to face a lot of things that I wasn't good at. I would often be very arrogant and dismiss people and just think that I knew better than everybody else. And he put me I was put in a working role in the prison, and that helped me to just take on other people's issues and problems a little bit more and actually be empathetic rather than just being like, oh, whatever, he's this or she's that. And so that was a big moment for me where I realized I was in a place to do something. I engaged a lot with the chaplain in there. He's become quite a close friend. He was absolutely wonderful. He was probably one of my shining lights in there. There was also for those in there who, I'm not quite sure what he actually said to me, but he sort of forced me to think a certain way about where I was in the space that I was in. And I just made a decision right then and there that I was gonna take ownership and responsibility of everything that I'd done, regardless of whether there was other people involved or not. I was gonna say, I've got myself here no matter what. And I'm just going to do whatever I can to get out of that. And so, if the answer to your question, taking ownership, like engaging with God and accepting the fact that He is our Savior, and that without Him, I believe anyway, that we aren't going to be anything. Anyway, and just from there, when I actually got to 180 TC, I decided I was just going to be really, really honest with myself and really honest about and learn to kind of sit still. Like, I've never been able to sit still. I've always been a very active person. I still am a very active person. I can't sit still, but learning to sort of sit still from time to time. and actually take in what was around you and really appreciate things for what they were, not just try to rush through life. Yeah, I suppose, it sounds very simple and cliche, but once I learned how to do that and just do what was in front of me first, like one day at a time, things just became very easy. And now I, even though there's still a lot of things in my life I have to sort out, I can go into detail later or whatever.
Sure.
But it's given me a real peace between my ears, knowing that I'm going to be okay no matter what, as long as I keep engaging. And like Troy sort of alluded to, I think recovery it's ongoing. I don't think you're ever out of it. I don't think you're ever out of the woods. I've heard stories of people being 30 years clean. They stop working, they stop doing the work, and all of a sudden, within 6 months, they're right back to it, and even in a worse spot. So I think that it's definitely an ongoing thing. And I've had, even though I don't feel the need to drink or to do drugs or anything like that anymore, because I know where it leads to. There still is like the awareness of, all right, what situation should I put myself in? I'll give an example. Yep. I was up at my parents' house about 2 weeks ago, and it was a Saturday night, and I was walking around. I was doing a big long walk, about a 2-hour walk, to a podcast. It was your podcast actually, and it was. I was like, oh, should I walk through the town? And I thought probably not a good idea, because I've got to walk past 3 pubs which I used to frequent quite a lot. Okay. One of them was one of the
triggers.
Yeah, triggers everywhere. And probably might run into people. Who knows? Like, it's just not a good place for me to be. So instead of, I decided to walk all the way around, which is far longer, and just to sort of stay away. I suppose I'm in that stage where I still want to stay away from all that kind of things, and I just don't want to have the option of having it be there at all.
No, I hear you. Okay, David, I hear what you're saying. Really, really, really interesting. I want to sort of drop in on that, because you're jumping ahead. You don't know what I want to do, and so that's okay. But Julian, look, your journey of recovery, again, without going specifically into straight away into the triggers and what led you into it and why, but what I'm interested to know is what resources for our listeners, what resources have you learned in recovery that you wish you'd had before you found yourself being unravelled by the substance use? So, if you know what I'm saying, there's kind of that stuff you've learned during recovery. You thought, gee, I wish I knew that before I started using drugs. Wish I knew that before I stepped harder into the drug using space. Any specific keys there for you, or it was just nah? It's just I was a mess and had to get.
To be honest, I think, and Troy can also speak into this as well. Having walked this journey, accountability, transparency, truthfulness, honesty, and more importantly, how I actually approach myself, seeing through it in a reflection from other people. So, for instance, seeking validation from both the positive and negative space is just as toxic as each other, and that was a major part of my downfall, was seeking that validation. And without the accountability there, nobody to answer to, left to my own devices, I just fell.
Brilliant. Now let's tap into that. This is interesting in a culture, particularly an individualistic culture like we live in the first world West, where we prize individuality. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of what, the value of that or not. There is certainly value in it. But then the nature of who do I listen to and why should I listen to them? And that's where accountability is important. So the argument is, well, we're told that you have all that you need, the wherewithal for life and its fullness of living is incarnately in you. It's like, ta-da, you're born with it, which is, complete rubbish. The human animal is, from an anthropological perspective, is a completely learned creature environment setting. It's like it develops by learning in its environment. And we understand cognitive learning, cultural learning, operant learning, all those kind of socialization principles that most of us are aware of. But when it comes to the individuality, so, well, okay, who makes the rules? Who says this is right? Who said this is good? Who said this is best practice? Who said this is not good practice? And why? And so when we say we don't have that in the marketplace, we can't have that. We can't have people telling each other how to live. But we're undone by that automatically. And you've experienced that. So you said about the accountability, but also wanting to find perhaps validation or significance. Without, if it's okay to tell us, what were some of the the key moments of seeking validation or seeking significance that led you to engage with substances?
Well, there were very key moments in my life. I went through sexual abuse when I was 7 years old. My father left when I was 9 years old, which led me to, that fear of abandonment, neglect, seeking validation, looking for a father figure to replace him.
Yeah. So deficit driven. Yep.
Absolutely. But then of course, with a ADD sort of brain, and in that seeking validation and wanting to forge forward and make something of myself to basically say I was worth it, I sought out that validation through music and through that instant gratification of love. Like, they're cheering for me, yay! I must be worth something. And so, through doing so, I actually discovered, in coming into program, I actually discovered that was my first addiction. Was that instant dopamine release of, yeah, you're doing a great job, you just did the thing on stage. Like, all of a sudden, I was like, everything that I had gone through was validated, and now I'm the hero. But that's just it. As soon as the show was finished, the lights dim, you go home and you go to bed, and you wake up the next day and you're still you. And so that desperation just rolled on to me. And as the crowds got bigger, I found that the applause and the cheers sounded dimmer to me. So I started to replace that with drugs and alcohol.
So this is, without in any way devaluing your experience, there's a little bit of cliche there. It's this whole...
It's massively cliche.
The deficit drivers then are replaced with a genuine need. I think this is one of the things about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, particularly abandonment, as we all know, that it creates a huge deficit, and that has to be met. And one thing I think is quite a remarkable psychologist, Elizabeth Mobley, back in the 90s, she coined the phrase, and she used a God term, and not that she was in a religious space. She said that God doesn't heal people of legitimate needs, he meets them. And I think when we have a legitimate need that's not met legitimately, it must be met illegitimately. That's the only other category left. And the illegitimacy of the things that we engage with may not be bad as such to start with, wanting applause, wanting accolade, wanting affirmation. They're genuine needs, but how I found that, and then of course it was a counterfeit. It wasn't significance, it was applause. Yep. And so therefore I have to keep chasing that. And that is a rabbit hole. I use that term a lot, but it's a rabbit hole most addicts go down, or potential addicts or dependency-driven people go down. Yeah, go.
Well, at the same time, in that space, I was able to hold them at arm's length. Because if they got close enough, they'd realise that I was as worthless as what I felt. So in that worthlessness and that hopelessness, you are able to hold people at arm's length. And there's always a drink in between you guys. There's always something there's a barrier. There's a space from the stage to the audience. I want your love, but don't get too close.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's where, of course, the impediment to genuine intimacy, non-sexual intimacy, in a sexualized culture, it's almost impossible to find unless you've got another source to go to, and of course in the entertainment / fun, hedonism / feel good music, all that stuff. Nothing wrong with those, intrinsically, but they spiral into this place of, this is where I get my stuff from, and it's not significant enough. It doesn't hold water. It's counterfeit and it evaporates pretty quickly, and so therefore I'm interested in that accountability factor, because I want to go back into that space. If you understood. Well, I'll ask this question. What would it take for you, before using substances, what would a healthy accountability for this 7 or 9-year-old boy look like? If going back now, knowing what you know now, what would look like if you could go back to that 9-year-old boy and rearrange his environment? What would that accountability look like that was healthy and helped you stay away from the drugs and build resiliency into you?
Well, I think it's what happened before that. When I was 7 years old, that was the thing that influenced and informed me and my choices moving forward, keeping secrets. being able to keep things in the dark became a professional practice to me. So being able to hide things away or to do things away from the view of other people, that, like, and I think this goes for a lot of addicts that go through this, is we isolate so we aren't seen to do that which others would deem is negative and a negative influence in our lives. And so as far as that accountability is concerned, it really comes down to what you are able to get away with underneath authorities' noses. For instance, you know, what I was able to hide in the corner under my bed when I was a child, you know, the packets of cigarettes or the magazines or any other dark matter, even down to the sorts of things that scared other people, that were horrific to other people, that I was like, oh, I'm going to grip onto this, which actually gripped onto me in turn. It had that foothold with me in being able to even manipulate and deceive, deception, do all those things away from other people so I could always appear on a superficial level that I was okay. But underneath all of that was that
deception. Yeah, that's why I suppose the question, and I understand that, and that's a perfect explanation of what does emerge and sort of evolve as a result of those experiences. But can you articulate, you may not be able to, that's fine. Can you articulate, you know, if you're able to, as an adult now in recovery, learning the lessons you've learned about accountability, what does healthy accountability look like with that little boy who's hiding under the bed? What would you have loved to have happened then to intervene?
Quite literally, someone going through my room. Healthy accountability is that being able to live a transparent life that is blameless in the dark as it is in the light. And through me discovering what true accountability looked like, there was a quote said by the author of the book, The Shack. He said, when all of your sins and all the things that you hide in the dark are dragged into the light, it is a terrifying and beautiful grace. And when you can look beyond what is actually happening in front of you, in other words, what we deem as punishment is actually discipline, that is a true accountability. That is true accountability.
Perfect.
Like being able to understand the difference between punishment and discipline. Like that's a huge aspect, I think, of especially growing up in that kind of environment.
And that is a relational based context, because they can look very similar, but when they have a different context, a loving, supportive, I want the best for you relationship, as opposed to I'm annoyed the heck out of you, I'm just going to give you what for to shut you up or get you to do what I want you to do. That context is important. Now, David, in that context, in your journey, obviously the recovery journey you've been in, and we'll get to you too in a minute, Troy. I'm really interested because one of the things we're developing at the moment, or have developed, we've got a paper submitted to a journal at the moment, looking at the lessons in recovery science and prevention science, and the overlap are quite significant. In fact, we would argue, of course, there are a number of caveats to this. We would argue that the journey is very similar, and the deficits in prevention that have to be reworked, remade, re-understood, reinvented, rediscovered in recovery, actually, if they were there in the first place, would be remarkable. So from your journey in recovery, and it's, you said you obviously had your moments of aha moments in jail, and that's quite a cataclysmic moment, obviously death, injury, incarceration, and people say, I put drug addicts in jail. So, mate, it's a wake-up call for most of them. Not everybody, I understand that, but it's just a moment of clarity. But what lessons have you learned over the last, X amount of years in recovery that you wished you had learnt before you started using substances?
Oh, that's easy. The biggest one is just how to slow down. And I think I sort of touched on it before, is actually appreciating life for what it is, not rushing through it. Because there's a lot of beauty in what you can find around you. Like, I live a very simple sort of life here. We just spend a lot of time on site. I spend a lot of time at the gym. I spend a lot of time working on myself. I spend a lot of time out in nature. I spend a lot of time trying to just appreciate what is actually around me. I spend a lot of time with my family, especially my mother. Whereas before, like she's always been there. She's been an amazing support throughout my life. So as my whole family, I was very lucky in that regard. But that'd be the biggest one for me. Most of the time when I started using drugs around about like my late teens, I got into the nightclub and raving scene and all that kind of stuff, and all the things that went along with that. And I was hooked in that very, very quickly. But it's not a scene where you sit down and relax. It's a scene where you keep going the whole time. And same with the fitness industry, not a scene where you sit down and relax. So if I was able to actually learn how to take one step at a time or build it brick by brick by brick rather than trying to put 50 in there at once, that would definitely have shown me a much more peaceful way to live. I was never like, I think that would be the easiest possible way to answer your question.
No.
That's probably the best lesson I've learned. There's a lot of other lessons as well, many other things. That's the biggest one for me, was actually slowing down. Like when I get into something, I do step 1 and 2, then I want to go and do step 500. I want to just skip it straight away. But I learned to slow down, and especially being, you say, I think a lot of people that have that ADHD brain are, probably half the guys in this program, probably most of the guys on the podcast as well. I'm just going to put that out there. But once I learned to slow down and had faith in God and faith in the process around me, peace came very quickly, and then there was just no reason to ever have to escape from reality ever again.
Oh, good. I love that. I think that specific moment of understanding that I am driven, and to be driven, and there's lots of different reasons people are driven, and you've just indicated one. And one thing about being driven is it's a distraction. If I've got a next step to go to, or if I can't find the next step, I'm going to make a next step. And that's what leads to decision making that, in fact, is not decision making that you are facilitating, but decision making that is facilitating you. And you're actually just being driven by your choices, because you just go, next thing, bang, bang, bang. Your mum was there, you said your mum was there, nature was there, the ability to pace yourself was there, but there was something that hindered you from doing that. So if you were going to be talking to a young person about slowing down the process you went into, or preventing that from them jumping into that space, what would you now do? And chiming in perhaps on what Julian said about accountability is part of it, but what would you do to actually instruct, develop, equip a young person to not go down that same path?
All I can sort of speak from is what I sort of missed as a child. Like, I suppose I was just never grateful for anything around me. I always kind of expected it. And I think that if young people if they learn to be really grateful for what they have, because I was only really grateful for it when it all got taken away from me. And then I thought, long story short, I lost access to all my children. I burnt pretty much every relationship bar my family, got rid of all that sort of stuff. And now, trying to get that all back. Now I'm all very, very grateful for all those things. But in answer to your question, I would say that learning to be grateful it may sound like a really simple thing, but I believe it can have a drastic impact on somebody's life. If you are actually grateful for what you have and for what's around you, then you'll learn to be able to slow down and take everything in, rather than just rushing through lives like ticking off a checklist. So that's one thing that I would say. Taking a lot of time for self-care, to actually take care of who you are, not just like physically. That for me was always very easy. I played sport pretty much my entire life. All I can remember from like church days and things like that, and growing up, is just what sport we played, when we played it. I played sports all the way through my teen years, all the way up into my mid-20s as well, into my early 20s as well. Then I kind of went away from it a little bit, which is where my use actually really started to kick off. So it sort of goes hand in hand. I think staying really connected to a community, and not being, and even like showing up on your bad days as well, whether that be a church community, a school community, a group of friends, a sporting community, or something of that nature. Staying and being, the big one is being honest. Because as soon as you're not honest, it becomes like this tiny little thing that becomes this huge, big can you're trying to kick down the road later on, and eventually it'll break your ankle. And if you learn to be those things, then I believe a lot of the prevention can happen that way. That's
very good. No, I think that, again, getting back into Julian's space too, I mean, obviously having someone in your world that can actually facilitate that as well. Mum was there, and maybe Dad as well, and sometimes we can ignore those. But those environments, those caring principal caregivers, that can actually craft that environment, because those things are there, but if they're not actively modeled, actively inculcated into the family and the setting, and to say, oh, let's slow down, guys, let's slow down as a family and let's have a chat about today. And we now know that at least if you have a family has 3 meals a day away from all devices and all TV and all electronic and digital, whatever, apparati, and sits together and talks and asks how their day went, what are we thankful for, what's bugging us. That is a huge protective factor against substance use. And those kind of things, that simple act engages all those things. You've got a bit of accountability, you've got honesty, you've got gratitude, you've got slowing down, you've got disconnecting from the frenetic, things like media. Sport is a good thing. It's an all-of-body kind of a deal, but if you're always on, it's almost the same as being always on in a digital framework as well. Troy, from a supervisor and a guy who's been through the journey himself, a lot of lived experience and very hard one and resiliency. Having 5 daughters and yourself and working with guys like Julian and David, and of course a lot of candidates you've engaged with over the years, what are some of the things, mixing those together, cherry picking if you like, or cutting and pasting from the various places in your world and your experience, what are some of the key things in recovery that you even now, maybe not now in recent years, because I don't know how old your daughters are, you've sown into your girls going, gee, I wish I had this before I hit the gear, and I wish I knew this before I started using drugs. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about that journey and what that kind of space looks like for you?
Yeah, I think my biggest lesson, if I could have got it before going into addiction, what the effect of my choices in addiction would have on others. So in other words, that family unit, me in addiction with 3 little kids, the effect it had on those 3 little kids. I remember, again, I like talking of overcoming stories, but the day after I finished graduating from the program, talking, 16 years ago, I had a row with my wife and she said, good for fucking you, you're recovered, what about me?
Oh, wow.
And I just went, wow. Yeah. And I think in all the years that I've worked with 180 TC, that is the biggest message that I can give to anyone else that comes through this place. If you can see life through someone else's eyes, the decisions that you make in your addiction choices might be completely different.
Troy, yeah. It's interesting you table that one, and obviously that's clearly your archetypal response, because that is shattered and shaped your world all at the same time. But this is now becoming a real issue in the global platform, global arena as well. It's a recovery family. So how does your family recover from your substance use? And my brother passed away last year. He was basically a lifelong weed user, and that didn't kill him straight up, but it contributed heavily to his psychosis and to his death in the end, physiologically, undermined him physiologically. And he died at the age of 61. And so... and
the effect it has following on, huge.
Yep, and my parents... And have been just stalwarts. They had to learn some hard lessons about, when to let go, when to engage.
Yeah.
I hate the word tough love, the phrase. I just think that's real love. Understanding boundaries, understanding what it looks like to create space for a person to be accountable for their behaviour, instead of always being bailed out, always being someone else. They dropped the ball, but we had to learn that. And my parents suffered wildly. Julian, you want to say something? Jump in.
Well, I was just gonna just with that, I'm 10 months clean, right, after 43 years, and for the first time I encountered what a true father's heart is, and I've encountered that through a lot of the guys, like the caseworkers, but especially from my caseworker, Dave, and my caseworker, Ray, but through Troy. The first time when I graduated and came up to start the graduate program, Troy literally said, we are going to say no to you. You are not going to like some of the decisions that we make, but we make them with your best interests and your future in mind. That right there, that it really illustrates exactly what we were talking about before. As when it comes to accountability plus discipline, you say tough love, but I mean, love is not soft. It's not roses. It's saying no, and it's loving you through the very worst of what you are capable of doing, and knowing what is possible on the other side, which is hope. And that's through all of that. That is exactly what's offered through what you were just saying.
Perfect. And look, this is, again, see, here we're going back to protective factors. You learn in recovery what every child sadly does not experience, should experience, in their caring, the most intimate and closest of relationships. Mum and dad looking after little ones, raising them, caring for them, investing in them, protecting them, not cottonwalling them. And I love that language, learning to say no. And one of the things that's in the marketplace globally is, and the pro-drug activists are great at this, and shutting down recovery alumni and their involvement even in the prevention sector, is that saying no to drugs doesn't work. It's a silly thing. And of course, what they do is they use a cliche line from a cheesy setting, and then they turn the whole thing on its head and say it's pointless. But you've just, again, collectively indicated again how vital. Now, the word no here means accountability, structure, the ability to prevent you from doing a certain thing, to hold you responsible for your actions. They're all no factors. They are the most protective, powerful factors. And if you cannot say no, if you don't have the ability to stop and evaluate and properly assess a setting to discover best practice, you are a sucker punch ready to happen.
Yep.
You are fodder for the system. And kids are being told that they can't say no because it's been couched and framed in a very weak and flaccid way. And what we see when we inculcate the understanding of what you guys have just talked about, and they go, yeah, I wish I had that. And so, well, you guys have said, yeah, we wish we had that when we were kids.
Well, how are you supposed to say it when you've never heard it?
Correct.
It seems so simple, but it is ginormously complex.
And that's
and by the time we put so much substance in our body, we don't have the ability to see through the right lenses to be able to make those correct decisions. We're either involved, it's either in our system or it's damaged our system. So if we haven't been taught those fundamental no's from a young age, then those fundamental no's are missed and they turn into yeses later on in life.
Perfect. And the permission model is not about permission to succeed. It's about permission to undermine. It's not about permission to find best practice. It's permission to experiment to your own demise. And that's a toxic messaging that the pro-drug activists are inculcating into culture and the young people by excising the very things we've talked about from the education space. That's why we're a big fan on building resiliency. And of course, the World Resiliency Day, World Resiliency Week platform is which 180TC is part of, is all about, again, reinventing and reinvesting those key elements, protective elements, proactive protective elements, which absolutely, unequivocally include the ability to set boundaries, good, solid boundaries, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Because what my brother did to my family and to us around it was breach all their boundaries, constantly breaching everyone else's boundaries. And to think, no boundaries yourself, you are a boundary wrecker because you don't know how to hold them. And so you become a very unsafe person. Now, this is not, and of course, now the pro-drug activists now saying, we don't want to stigmatise the drug user. Well, calling someone to account for certain behaviours and certain outcomes with the genuine support to see them exit that and to make amends for that and to repair that, that's key. But to simply say, we don't say bad things about drug addicts or we don't challenge their behaviour is just another boundary-destroying exercise, which actually undermines their capacity, not just to recover, but to become the agent of change in their community. And that's what I love about what you guys do at 180TC and other, obviously, 12-step and therapeutic communities, is this whole idea of understanding what it means to reinvent good relationships that care about the future, the present and future well-being of a person, the full capacity of them to develop agency, to become the best they can be. And without no's and without encouragement, I think it was and I'm on my little tirade here, but I'm going to run with it. There was a famous journalist who borrowed from a congregational minister. He said 2 things that parents should give a child. One is roots and the other one is wings. And see, that the no is the roots in my book. And what I've seen, the no is the ability to set good boundaries, to drill down deep into understanding, finding best practice. By going deeper, you don't just hit the superficial stuff and it's all very shallow. There's no roots because you just say yes to everything. But then the wings, then you can give them wings because they know how to fly safely and well. And this is what the prevention models do, and what the recovery alumni can contribute to that. So that's really, really powerful, John. I mean, I really think that's a key element to what we're trying to talk about here, and that's where the fence and the ambulance poem comes into its own. So again, I just want to keep going down this road because it's really important. We talked about what sort of led you into the space. One of the things that, okay, we know the drivers, and Troy, you did intimate on this, once the system starts dealing and transacting with the substance, we don't make decisions make us. And so we just keep, just tripping over the same thing. But when you're in that space, if there's another factor outside what we just discussed, what kept you stuck in there? I mean, we know the triggers to get you out. We know that they're usually cataclysmic sort of events. Sadly, that's what has to happen. A hard boundary lands, The hard boundary is jail. The hard boundary is, family loss. The hard boundary is your wife going, well, this is great for you, but wow, So that's a hard boundary. That's important. But what kept you stuck in there? Like, what was the thing that kept saying to you, oh, this is okay. You're doing okay. David.
What kept me stuck in
what kept you just
lifestyle?
ticking over?
I guess a lot of it was to do with the fact that I was in certain scenes for a long period of time, and I found a lot of acceptance and kind of, I guess you could say, like I just felt good about being able to get, sort of sort things out for people in those sort of areas. And later on down the line, and I was always sort of going out and partying and having fun and all that kind of thing, but you're just looking for acceptance is what I was trying to say,
good.
And finding acceptance within those spaces. And, it was also, and it sort of became an identity over a long period of time. So I was sort of the fit guy, and I was also the guy that could, move in these sort of certain areas. And that gives you I guess you could say, makes you feel like you're above peer to certain people. They look at you a certain way. And that became an addiction in itself.
Yeah.
And then, sort of later on, like...
A bit like Julian's applause, it's like, it's the same sort of thing.
It's exactly, pretty much exactly the same thing. And so, to be fair, like the actual industry that I was in was the same thing. Like personal training, although you are going out and doing like a servant kind of part and trying to help people, you are also getting, like, people look at you because they sort of where you want to be. And you get that kind of validation from them constantly. So that was probably something that I did from the teenage years all the way into my mid-30s before going into jail, and even while I was in there as well. So that was what kept me sort of in that space. Also, like I would justify my drinking, for example. Like I'd say I'm only buying like 3 at a time, 5 times a day, or 4 times a day, or something like that. Like you would justify the fact that at least I'm not as bad as that guy.
Yeah.
But in reality, you actually end up spending more money and spending more time actually chasing it. So it doesn't make any difference whether you're doing it that way or not. So you have all these little like justifications that says, oh, I'm not as bad as that person, or at least I don't inject. I never intravenously inject the drug. So at least I'm not as bad as that person. Which is complete nonsense. It doesn't make a difference how you do it. It's all really the same thing. So it was just little. So in answer to your question, little justifications, and also the validation of the scene and the things that I was kind of doing for that very extended period of time. And only really once I was in 180TC for a while, I realized I had to get validation another way. I've always been a highly competitive person.
Yep.
And I would validate myself by winning sport and winning
at
whatever it
cost.
was. Doesn't matter what it is, you win at all costs.
Trash the best that person,
Yeah, absolutely. And learning how to actually lose and be great and be happy for the person that wins has been a huge challenge for me, but it's given me a real...
You suffer from Schadenfreude. I can't be
What's
happy
that?
for someone else winning.
Yeah, but I used to be like that, but like only very recently I've been able to do that, and you realise that it actually makes you enjoy what you were doing more in the
Yeah,
first place.
beautiful.
And like I was saying before about appreciation and really learning to explore the space around you. I lost Julian again. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, like that was sort of a big thing for me. But yeah, so staying in the spaces, yeah, the justification, the validation, and just like I needed to be liked for some reason. I don't know why that was. I'm really not like I've tried to unpack this in psychology less sessions and get all the way back to there is a few certain things here and there that I think might be contributing to it, but it really made no sense for me. Like I had a lot of I had a pretty good upbringing. I was pretty lucky in that regard. I had very supportive parents. I had a brother. We fought all the time, but like we're still very close to this day.
Yeah.
You know, like we fought as kids, but we're still very close. Um, so yeah, it sort of didn't make sense to me. But once I sort of learnt that I could get more validation from what like just doing what God wants of me and doing what's in front of me and just helping those around me, that and with a more pure heart, not trying to be better or trying to
Yeah.
be someone they look up to or anything like that.
I think the
That
word you're looking for there is humility, my friend.
yeah,
It's a
yeah. So
virtue and a
that's
quality
set me
that
free.
is the base of all good actions, and the one we find hardest to actually cultivate. I think that's it. That's really important. T.S. Eliot, the famous poet, made that statement, and I want to chime in with that because he said half the harm done in this world is done by people who want to be important. They don't mean to do harm. They're just caught up in the endless pursuit of trying to think well of themselves. Powerful insight. And T.S. Eliot was a Nobel Prize-winning poet, of course. Now, Troy, I just want to jump up. Sorry, Dave, but I think you hit some nails there. Troy, that kind of keeping you stuck. Now, you're a dad with 3 little girls that you said before. Now, I would have thought, yeah, I know, but when you were when you started to get out, so you had 3. So even with 3 girls under your belt, you're still cycling back into this addiction space, in this using space. What kept you stuck in there? With all those motivators in play, you got a marriage, you got kids. What was the thing that got you stuck, kept you stuck in that space?
I don't now, but I fell in love with it. It was my best friend.
There
it was
it
what
is.
I woke up with in the morning. It's what I went to bed with at night. And you didn't think, I didn't think I could function without it in my system.
Yeah, the mistress.
Yeah, the mistress. Yep, the love of my life, chasing the dragon, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just thought that
Who would I be if I didn't have that? I might actually have to have a good look at myself if I didn't have that substance hiding me.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And I think there's honesty. And that's the honesty thing too. It's like, I've read a few poems, as I'm sure we all have, from decades ago, written about the mistress of alcohol, the mistress of heroin, or whatever. And I think that is a powerful driver. And even though you've got, and we know, I don't know if you gentlemen are married, but I've been married, nearly 40 years now, and it's tough. Being married's tough, and being married to me is tougher. But it's, but the mistress idea is interesting because you've got intimacy there. You've got intimacy with a partner, a wife, and you've got 3 little girls at that stage. So you've got the capacity for genuine intimacy, yet you still chose the counterfeit. And this is one of the most powerful things. Julian, go.
Well, I mean, on that note, I was actually having a conversation with one of the support workers, a counsellor, going through the process of restoration and whatnot. And we got onto the subject of pornography, for instance, right? As an addiction, she said to me, because I said to her, oh, look, it was never really a problem for me. I'll use it just as a release or, something like that. And she said to me, look, the fact is, whatever you use to manage your emotions is an addiction.
Beautiful.
End of story. If you are using something to manage your emotions, now that can go into healthy aspect or a negative aspect. But healthy can cross over into negative quite easily.
Yep.
And it really comes down to, as she even said, like, to go on from that mistress point, like, if you are inviting another party into a relationship without their knowledge, then that is literally, no matter what it is, it could be substance, it could be pornography, it could be, I don't know, just spending time just looking at your phone instead of looking at your partner. Whatever you're using to manage your emotions is an addiction.
That's good.
And
Yeah, no, that's good. No, I'm just saying and I think this is one of the difficulties about it, the new stigma denying, and I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong, gentlemen. I'm all for destigmatising substance use to help people escape substance use, but not destigmatise substance use to normalise substance use, which I think is the quiet agenda of many parties in this space. But I think you're right. Calling that out is a key issue. Again, the accountability factor. Let's name this for what it is. Not name and shame, not name and blame, but name and change. We're calling this. This is a problem. And this problem is controlling your life. But more importantly, as you, with you, Troy, you've effed up your marriage, effed up your family. It's like, oh wow. So, my getting off on my thing is destroying everyone around me. Now, that's not freedom. That is not freedom. That is enslavement.
That's right. It's a simple form of DV.
Perfect.
You might not be giving the missus a slap around the head, but you are causing her burden for her life that she does not deserve, which is the same.
Let's call it domestic violence. That's exactly
domestic violence. The addiction in the household against families is domestic violence.
Intimate partner violence. Yep. Child abuse.
Yep. She suffers. They suffer. It is 100%.
So some of our listeners are going to get offended by that, but these gentlemen have lived the nightmare, and so have their families, their partners, and their close relationships. And they know the casualties it's been. It's not about slamming these guys, putting them down, calling them names. It's they're saying, hey, we did this, we're making it right, and we want to stop other people from doing this in the first place so that they don't have to go through the hell that we've been through. More importantly, don't put their families through the hell we've put our families through. Now, that's a message that needs to be heard in the marketplace, and that's one that's not heard very often because, again, these oppressive speech codes, all in the name. Again, I want to make this very clear to our listeners. We are very much for helping any mechanism that helps the substance user exit drug use, and in destigmatising does that, that's great. But if any mechanism is used to normalise drug use and ongoing drug use and keeping people in these spaces of self-harm and harming their families, that's not good practice. That's not good boundary setting, and that's not healthy for a society, let alone the individual. So we want to call that out. Look, gentlemen, this is really great. There's a couple of other rabbit holes that I'm staying away from, mate. But I do want to finish up. We've done this with a number of, in fact, the majority of our guests. We put and I'm pretty sure we know what the answer is going to be. We put on the table sort of a last question to say, which do you think should be the priority, the fence or the ambulance? David? Fence. Julian?
Fence, absolutely.
Okay, fence. And what about you, Troy? Have the last word, my friend, as the boss and mentor of all.
The fence.
The fence.
Put me out of a job, please.
Great line. Put me out of a job.
Well, put me out of a job, please.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, Julian, David, and Troy, it's been an absolute joy. Sorry for the hiccups on the way through with the platform, but we'll sort that out. And you guys have been fabulous. Again, we could spend a lot more time on this, and maybe we'll revisit this journey in part 2 somewhere down the line. But thanks again to 180TC for investing in our platform, and this great program needs to be engaged. If anyone out there who's looking to step into recovery, needs to step into recovery, or family members who are looking for help for their partner or family or loved one to step into recovery, please contact 180TC. These guys really know what they're doing, and they've got a good track record. So again, gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and until next time, everybody out there in podcast land, stay safe and avoid the unnecessary harm. Until next time.
As we wrap up today's session, remember, each step towards understanding is a step away from unnecessary harm. We're here to empower, inspire, and pave the way for optimal well-being. Stay resilient, stay informed, and continue being the change your community needs. Thank you for joining us at the Unnecessary Harm Podcast. Until next time, take care and keep pushing forward.